So let's continue our exploration of free will and moral responsibility and try to figure out whether or not it's reasonable to believe that these things actually exist in reality. Now, you know from our previous discussion that this exploration rests on three statements, or relies on three statements. Statement number one is we are determined. And statement number two is if we're determined, then we lack the freedom necessary to be morally responsible. And statement number three is we do have the freedom necessary to be morally responsible. Now, you get to pick two of these statements to regard as true, not all three. If you choose all three, you've got a logical contradiction and it's not going to work. But any pair of these will. So you have to figure out, is it statements number 1 and 2 that I'm going to regard as true? Or statements number 2 and 3? Or statements number 1 and 3? Now you know how the determinists are going to answer this question. Remember, the determinist says everything that occurs, every event without exception, is causally determined by prior events. In other words, when an event occurs, it doesn't just occur out of nowhere. And it doesn't just happen to occur as it does. It occurs as it does because of everything that led up to that moment. It was inevitable that this event occur, given the events that occurred before it. There was no way around that. It was determined to occur. And the determinist, importantly, is going to say, well, human thoughts and choices and actions are events, right? A thought it's an event that occurs in your physical brain. A choice is an event that occurs in your physical brain. Therefore, the determinist says, human thoughts, choices, and actions are, without exception, causally determined by prior events. So this is going to mean that the determinist rejects the third statement. They're going to say, I believe it's true that we are determined. And I believe it's true that if we're determined, we lack the freedom necessary to be morally responsible. Now, with that second statement, what they're going to be saying is, look, if I do something that you don't like, don't blame me. I couldn't have done otherwise, because there was a series of events happening that led to me making this decision to take that action. And that series of events led to me taking this action, and I couldn't have avoided it. Felt like I could have, feels like I have free will, but the determinist says, I actually don't. So the determinist is going to say, moral responsibility doesn't really exist in any meaningful way. In other words, if I save a drowning baby and you decide to praise me for that, I don't actually deserve it, says the determinist, because I couldn't have not saved the baby. It was determined to happen by all of the events leading up to that moment. So sure, I'll take the praise you heap on me for doing this thing we both regard as wonderful, but I don't actually deserve it, and you're not really even justified in offering it to me. And then the converse of that would also have to be true. If I do something that you don't like, if I do something immoral, like instead of saving the drowning baby, throw the baby into a pool, don't blame me. I couldn't help it, says the determinist. It's what I had to do given all of the events that occurred up to this moment of me throwing the baby into the pool. All right? So now if this rubs you as kind of wrong because it doesn't seem to represent how you experience your own life, right? If you think, gosh, I don't think of myself as sort of a passive, like a passenger, actually, like a passenger in my body that is having these experiences of thoughts and choices and taking actions, and I'm just kind of along for the ride, but everything that's occurring is being caused to occur by all of the events outside of me. That doesn't feel right. Well, if that sounds like you, maybe you're a libertarian. Okay, now remember, a libertarian is not necessarily a political libertarian. They're just simply someone who rejects that first statement. A libertarian says, I do not accept that we are determined. But I do accept, says the libertarian, I do accept that if we were determined, then we would lack the freedom to be morally responsible. So I agree with your if-then statement. If this were the case, then we would lack the freedom to be morally responsible. But of course, I rejected the first premise that we're determined. And, says the libertarian, I think we do have the freedom necessary to be morally responsible. So you can hold me to account on a moral level, not necessarily a legal level, but on a moral level. When I lie, says the libertarian, you can condemn me. Say, you didn't have to do that. When I do something really good, you should praise me, says the libertarian, because I didn't have to do that, but I chose to. So now what we need to do is figure out, well, why do the libertarians think they're right? What are the problems that they have with the determinist argument that causes them to reject it and instead choose to believe that we actually have free will?